Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with another video about life in Spain. And today we're going to be looking at some of the concerns that people may have before they move to a country like Spain, or any other country for that matter, but we're going to put it into a Spain context. Now, I've been preparing another video about expat living, or immigrant living if you like, and it's from a survey done by the Internations organization. They put out a survey every year about expat living and some of the good things and bad things about different countries. And some of the biggest concerns before moving to another country have been highlighted in this survey. So we're going to have a look at some of those today. And they talk about things like language barrier, distance from home country, high cost of living, not being able to find friends, effect on future finances, culture shock, insufficient healthcare standards, lack of safety and security, unhappiness of partner, spouse or family, financial dependence on partner, bad local infrastructure, and of course, unappealing location. And as I said, I'm going to put it into a Spain context and look at some of these points here. Now, the first thing they mention is the language barrier. Now, I have in many videos talked about the problems of the language barrier when you come to a country like Spain. And let's be honest, if you don't speak Spanish at a reasonable level, you're going to struggle in this country. Unless that is, you're going to be moving to one of these coastal destinations where there's a lot of foreign people that speak English, that speak German, or speak your language, and maybe you'll be able to get by without having to learn much of the local language. However, language barrier is, as I said, one of the big problems when you come to a country like Spain, because everybody speaks Spanish, logically. Now, there are people that speak English. Spain's English level in general, people here in Spain have a not bad English level nowadays, especially young people. A lot of young people have an intermediate level of English, maybe an upper intermediate level of English, but you're not going to be able to speak English or find people that speak English in every place that you go to here in Spain. So that's why learning the language, in my opinion, is fundamental to the integration in a place like this. And it's also going to make your stay in Spain a lot better if you do go out of your way to learn the language. Now, I'm not saying that you have to become fluent in the language, but your day-to-day stuff like going to the shops, being able to have basic conversations with people, trying to make friends, which is another point here. All of those things will be vastly improved if you're able to speak the language, okay? So I always recommend that that is one of the first things you do, or one of the things you prepare before you come to a country like Spain, is learn the language, at least to that intermediate level. Of course, when you get here and you do make an effort, you're going to be able to pick up a lot more of the language. So, keep that in mind, but try to have that intermediate level, or at least the pre-intermediate level before you come, and it's going to make your life a lot easier, in my opinion. Now, the second thing they mention is distance from home country or family. Now, for a lot of people, this is going to be a huge problem, especially if you're moving from a non-European country and it's going to take you a long time to get home. Should something happen, let's say that there's a problem in your family back home and you need to get there quickly, of course, the further you are away, the bigger of a problem that's going to be. So distance from home country or family can be a big concern for a lot of people. Now, it was a concern for me, but over time it gets a bit easier. You learn to live away from your family, you learn to live away from your friends, and you make new friends. And of course, in my case, with my girlfriend and my family here, you start a new family. So in that case, it becomes a little bit easier. But there are people that are going to be quite close to their families, and that distance aspect is going to be a problem. But nowadays, thankfully, we have good communications and we can connect through things like Skype. You can have a WhatsApp group. You can talk to your mother, your father, your brothers, your sisters, your friends all the time on these social media applications. Now, it's not the same, obviously. It's not the same as having a face-to-face conversation, but it's pretty good. And it is a way that you can keep people informed of what's happening in your life from Spain. And a lot of people are going to be grateful that you give them a call on Skype, that you give them a call on WhatsApp, that you send them a message now and again, that you put a few pictures on Instagram. So the communication side of that, in the sense that we have great internet connections here in Spain, is going to help you get over that problem of distance from home, country and family. Now, the third concern is high cost of living. Now, in Spain, that's not necessarily a problem depending on how much money you're going to be earning. I've spoken in videos before that general cost of living standards here are quite low. A little bit expensive to rent houses and flats nowadays because of certain aspects, but supermarket costs, clothing costs are not all that expensive, and your going out costs are reasonable as well. So if you want to go out to a restaurant, if you want to go out and have a drink, if you want to go out to a bar, costs are quite reasonable here, but it is a bit of a concern. However, for Spain, as I said, shouldn't really need to be a concern because the cost of living here is not too bad. Now, it all depends on how much you're going to be making. Salaries here are not that high, but if you're coming here with a job already lined up, which I presume that a lot of people are. In fact, I've had people contact me over the last few months that are saying that they're coming to live here in Malaga and they're going to be making this amount of money. Will I be able to live well? And I normally give them the advice that with that type of salary, they can live quite well. If you're able to earn anywhere between 1,500 and 2,500 euros a month, you're going to be able to live well in Spain. Of course, the more you make, the better. But if you're one of these people that can't get a good salary or you don't have a lot of income coming in, cost of living could be a bit of a worry because prices do increase. And that's one of the things that over the years, especially since the euro came in here in Spain, a lot of basic prices have increased a fair bit. So keep that in mind. But general cost of living shouldn't really be a concern in my opinion. Now, the fourth point they talk about here is not being able to find friends. Now, I must admit that Spain is not the easiest country to make friends in, especially again if you don't speak the language. But in general, I find people here to be very family orientated and they tend to have groups of friends that they've had for a long time. For example, my girlfriend, her best friends are still people that she went to primary school with. And I wouldn't say that we haven't made any new friends over the years, but I would say that those traditional friendships are always the ones that people fall back on, and again the family aspect as well. But that's just my particular situation. I looked into this a little bit, and there are people that say that it's easy to make friends in Spain, and there's people that say that it's not easy to make friends in Spain. So I think it really depends on each individual personality. I'm not really a person that needs a big circle of friends, so in my case it's not really a problem if I don't meet a lot of people. And I have a lot of contact with my students, so I'm able to socialize in that regard as well. Not necessarily socializing, going out and having drinks and dinner with people, although I do know people that do that quite a lot with their students. But in my case, I prefer just to come home and relax and keep that small circle of friends that I have made over the years. So can be a bit of a problem, but again, depending on your personality, it should or shouldn't be a concern. Now, the next one here is effect on future finances, and this one can be a bit of a concern, especially when you come to a country like Spain and you decide to invest in the Spanish economy. Now, as we've seen in the last decade or so, the Spanish economy has gone down a fair bit, and if you invested before that downturn, obviously you would have lost money. That's one of the things that I have noticed compared to people back in Australia, that Australia's been growing for a long time. Maybe it's changed a little bit now, but over the last 20 years it's been growing, whereas my finances went up and then they went down when the crisis hit Spain. And that meant that property values went down. It meant that your private pension went down if you had it on the stock market. It also meant now that banks in the European Union don't give very high interest rates, so savings, can't really make any money on savings. So it is difficult from that point of view, and it can be a concern about future finances. So keep that in mind. And there's also some speculation about whether the pension system here in Spain is viable. So if you have been paying into the Spanish pension system for a long time, maybe it might be a bit of a worry, especially when you read some of the newspapers and listen to some of the people talking about how the system isn't really viable long term. So it can be a problem. Now, the next thing they talk about here is culture shock. Now, obviously, if you come from a country like Australia, like me, or you come from an English-speaking country in general, yeah, they're multicultural places, but they don't really prepare you for the culture shock of coming to a country like Spain, where a lot of things are different. Not only the language, but also the way things get done, the timetables are different, and there's just a general difference in a lot of the way things happen here, which can be a bit of a culture shock. The lunch times, the food culture, all of those things can be a bit of a shock at first, but it isn't necessarily something that you should be concerned about, because I found it fairly easy to adapt to Spain. I mean, it wasn't a question that in the first week I was adapted, but within the first 6 months to a year, I was able to get into that Spanish lifestyle. And yeah, the original culture shock wore off fairly quickly. But it is something that can concern some people. But when you come to another European country like Spain or Portugal or Italy, there's going to be things that are different, but there's going to be a lot of things that are fairly similar as well. So really nothing to worry about there. Now, the next thing they talk about here is insufficient healthcare standards. No need to worry about that in Spain. Healthcare in general in this country is fairly good. It might depend on which area you are living in. For example, here in Madrid, healthcare is excellent, public healthcare that is, and you also have a good private healthcare system as well. So from a healthcare standard, really nothing to worry about. I've been through the healthcare system here. I've had an operation, and I must say that I was fairly pleased with the result of that and the treatment that I got. And I also see specialists every year as well for different things, and the service is good, and it's fairly quick and it's fairly efficient. So really nothing to worry about from a healthcare point of view here in Spain. Now, the next thing they talk about here is lack of safety and security. And I've spoken about this in other videos, that I think that, in my opinion, it's not really a problem here in Spain. I find Spain to be a safe country. You do get minor crimes, you do get your pickpocketing crimes, you do get your house robberies and things like that, but you don't get a lot of the crimes that are associated with some other countries in the world. You don't really get carjackings here, or at least I haven't heard of too many cases of carjackings. Murders are relatively low. There's no gun culture here. There's not really a serious problem with drug cartels. Maybe in some areas in the south there is, but it shouldn't really affect you. There have been some cases over the years in places like Marbella where there's been some mafia type related crimes, but if you're not involved in that, you really shouldn't have anything to worry about. And as I said, I find Spain a fairly safe and secure country. There have been some recent cases and some recent warnings. I think the US has recently warned about Spain regarding inappropriate behavior by men towards women. So always a good idea to be vigilant. But I think in general, Spain is a fairly safe country, and it really shouldn't be a concern for a lot of people. Now, the next point they mention here is unhappiness of partner, spouse or family. Now, my family is from Spain here. My girlfriend is Spanish. My son was born here. So I can't really speak about this, but I have known people that came here with a British partner or an American partner, Canadian partner, and one of the two decided that Spain wasn't for them. And of course, they either end up separating, getting divorced, or going back to live in the country of origin. I've also known people here that have got divorced, and getting divorced in a country can be a bit of a nightmare. You come to Spain with your Spanish girlfriend or boyfriend that you've met somewhere around the world, and a few years later you have a few kids and you get divorced, and then you have to think about those things. So it can be a bit of a concern, and for some people, getting used to living in Spain is going to be difficult. We mentioned that before, that maybe the distance, maybe the homesickness can be a problem. And if somebody gets upset, there's no point living here for a long time. So it can be a bit of a concern. But in general, try to keep happy, try to find new things to do, and it should be okay. And if your partner doesn't like living here, well, find somewhere else to live. Now, the next one here, financial dependence on partner. Again, this can be a problem, especially if you're coming here for a short period of time and only one person is going to be working. You are going to be financially dependent on your partner. A lot of the people that I know, both people work, so they don't have that financial dependence, but it can be a bit of a problem. But nowadays, of course, it's a problem anywhere, financial dependence on a partner. And if you don't have your own financial independence, of course, it can be a concern. So I always recommend trying to find something to do. Maybe you can teach English in your free time. Maybe you can meet people that way. Maybe you can also find another hobby to do that can bring in some type of income. So always good not to be financially dependent on somebody else, but sometimes it's unavoidable. So I can understand that it can be a concern. Now the next one here is bad local infrastructure. Now this doesn't really relate to Spain. Spain, in my opinion, has good infrastructure. Okay, there are some bad roads, especially if you go into some of the more remote country areas, but the motorway system in Spain, or the highway system in Spain, is very good. The train system in Spain is good. The fast train system in Spain is good. Airports are good, lots of airports around the place, so that's an important thing to keep in mind. Should you need to get home quickly, if you're living in the coastal areas, Madrid or the other big cities, you can normally get to an airport fairly quickly, get a connection to Madrid or Barcelona or Malaga or wherever your flight going home will leave from, and you can get around fairly easily. And as I said, if you're in a place where there isn't really an airport, you can get a train to a place where there is, or a bus. So the infrastructure in Spain is good, in my opinion. And the last thing here is unappealing location. Now, I don't know too many people that find Spain an unappealing location. There are some aspects of places in Spain which maybe aren't the most attractive, especially in big cities. But in general, Spain is a country that is a very appealing location for a lot of people. The sun shines, the weather's generally good in the majority of the country, great beaches, great leisure activities, a lot of things to do, great nightlife, great food and drink culture. What more can you ask for? I don't consider Spain to be an unappealing location. Quite the opposite. Spain has a lot of things that will appeal to a lot of people, and definitely a pro from that point of view. So I'm going to wrap this video up now, looking at some of the biggest concerns that people might have before moving to Spain. I hope I answered some of your questions. Questions or comments, please leave them in the section below. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. I'll see you in the next video. Hasta luego.